Hello, welcome back. So, in my last video, talking about the TOEFL opinionated speaking part, I talked about I would do a video on transitional phrases. That's what this is about. But I'm also going to include connectors. I was talking with someone yesterday who had a question about connectors, and I thought, you know what? Let me include that with this video. There's some similarities and there's obviously some differences, but both will be very, very helpful for your TOEFL. And it will also be helpful through your journey with English, with not only speaking, but writing as well. So let's go ahead and get started. But I do want to say, surprisingly, you probably already know this. We're just putting a title to it now. All right. So what exactly are connectors? We link things together. We connect them, which is why they're called connectors. But you know them. And what I mean by that is you take one part of a sentence, another part of a sentence, and you put a word in there and you connect them. However, therefore, by the way, they make things more clear, more logical, whether you're speaking or you're writing. So, what are transitional phrases? Well, they help move from one idea to another. So, connectors, they'll connect things, they will link something together. But transitional phrases, they're moving one idea to another. So there is some difference there. So for example, transitional phrases, on the other hand, as a result, in addition, those are some examples. So connectors are usually just single words, but, so, and. But transitional phrases tend to be longer. As a result, in addition. So for example, here's an example of a connector. I was tired, so I stayed home. So technically, we could have these as two different sentences. It's not very exciting. I was tired, I stayed home. Or we could just say, I was tired. But if we add that connector, it's more clear. We're kind of putting a missing puzzle piece in there to connect everything. I was tired, so I stayed home. Now, if we want to put a transitional phrase into our same example, it would be a little bit different. I was tired, period. As a result, I stayed home. There's our transitional phrase. All right, let's go on to the next one. So these are our common connectors, which I said you probably know them, but now we're putting a title to them. And, but, so, or because. So when we're using and as a way to connect something, we're adding information. I like ice cream and I like cake. So I'm giving you more information to what I like. But is going to show contrast. In a previous video, I talked about contrast, meaning it shows differences, and most of the time in your TOEFL, even if you take the IELTS or even if you're at the university, you'll see something that says compare and contrast the following. Compare would be show the similarities. Contrast would be show the differences. So when we use but, most of the time, oftentimes we are showing something different. So for example, I like ice cream, but I like cake more. So is going to show a result. I was tired, so I went home. So the result of being tired is I just decided to go home. Or is going to show options. So for example, would you like coffee or would you like tea? So I'm giving you an option, coffee or tea. Now, because it's going to show us a reason, but to make this simple for you, to simplify it, always think of why. Because is our why. When we're looking at a sentence and we need to connect it together and we see that because, we need to ask why. Why? I like her because Think of why. Why do I like her? Because she's nice. I like her because she's nice. So because is going to show that reason, that why. All right. So here are some common transitional phrases. In addition, we're going to add some more information to what we're talking about. In addition, when you arrive here in the morning, there will be breakfast for you available. So I've explained to you what's going to happen, but I'm also adding on to the information that when you arrive, wow, you could get some donuts because I said breakfast. However, that's another way of saying I'm going to show you some differences. However, we're going to show some contrast. However, I think I would rather have the ice cream. However, I don't like how you're talking to me. So anytime you're showing something with a contrast, you're going to use however. All right. As a result, that's going to show a consequence. Since you were screaming at me, as a result, you're going to have to spend the afternoon in your room. For example, that's kind of an obvious one. You're giving an example. For example, when I drink water, I like to put a cucumber in it since I don't like the taste of water. And then, of course, on the other hand, you're listening to an alternative view. You're seeing and hearing something that's a little bit different. I like to buy frozen vegetables. On the other hand, I do prefer the taste of fresh vegetables. So I'm talking about something a little bit different. All right, I've got some examples here. By the way, have you met my friend? See, this is giving a little bit more clarity, which is another word for clear in my sentence. I could say, have you met my friend? But I make it sound nicer. By the way, have you met my friend? I studied all night. Therefore, I passed the test. Woohoo! I love coffee. However, I only drink it in the morning. We're showing some contrast there. She is a great singer. In addition, she plays the piano. That's a great example of a transitional phrase. I'm talking about one thing, but I'm going to add some more information so you know more of what I'm talking about. Because it sounds kind of boring if I just say, she's a great singer. Okay, that's really cool. But let me tell you what else. In addition, I'm adding more information. She also plays the piano. So now you might think, wow, she's a great singer and she plays the piano? We could go out. On the other hand, we could stay in and watch a movie. So I'm telling you an alternative. That's a transitional phrase for this is something else we could do. So we could go to California. On the other hand, California is expensive. We could go to Florida and have a longer vacation. So I'm telling you we could do one thing, but I'm giving you an alternative for something else. So these connectors and transitional phrases, they're not only good for TOEFL, IELTS, they're good for your personal journey in English because they will help you speak with more clarity. They will also help so much when you're turning in an essay or for your writing part of your TOEFL or any exam that you take. So again, if you have any questions, concerns, always let me know. These videos are made because of stuff you message me about, and I'm always happy to help. Thank you so much. Have a great day.